I never thought a simple phone call could change everything. But as I stood in my corner office, staring out at the New York skyline, my mother's voice crackled through the speaker, carrying with it the weight of years of guilt and obligation. "Yasmin, sweetie, I hate to ask, but we're in a bit of a tight spot this month," she said, her tone a practiced mix of apology and expectation. "Your father's medical bills have gone up again, and with Sarah's wedding coming up." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest. This wasn't the first time, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. I was Yasmin Khoury, VP of Finance at one of the top firms in the city, and yet here I was, feeling like a child again, unable to say no to my mother's subtle manipulations. "How much?" I asked, my voice flat. I already knew the answer would be, "More than last time." "Oh, just a little help. Maybe 5,000? I know it's a lot to ask, but you've always been so good to us, Yasmin. We're so proud of you. You know that, right?" Pride. That's what they always fell back on. As if my success was a family achievement, something they could cash in on whenever they needed. I looked down at my designer watch, a gift to myself for landing a major client last quarter. It suddenly felt heavy on my wrist. "I'll transfer it today," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. "But Mom, we need to talk about this. It can't keep going on like..." "Oh, thank you. Sweetheart, you're a lifesaver. I've got to run. Your aunt is coming over. Love you." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the hollow echo of my unspoken words. I sank into my leather chair, the plush comfort doing nothing to ease the tension in my shoulders. How had it come to this? When had I become an ATM instead of a daughter? I pulled up my banking app, the balance a stark reminder of my success and my failure. Success in my career, failure in setting boundaries. As I authorized the transfer, a familiar bitterness rose in my throat. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about autonomy, about the right to live my own life without constant guilt trips and emotional blackmail. A knock at my door jolted me from my thoughts. "Ms. Khoury, your 2:00 is here." I straightened my blazer, pushing down the turmoil inside. "Send them in, please." As my next appointment walked in, all smiles and handshakes, I plastered on my professional mask. But underneath, something had shifted. A seed of rebellion, long dormant, had begun to sprout. I couldn't keep living like this, torn between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. That night, as I sat alone in my penthouse apartment, surrounded by the trappings of success that seemed to mock me, I made a decision. It was time to break free, to reclaim my life and my future. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Years of conditioning and cultural expectations wouldn't disappear overnight. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over my mother's contact. I could call her now, lay it all out, set my boundaries once and for all. But the thought of her disappointment, of the family drama that would ensue, made me hesitate. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to type. "Dear Mom and Dad, I love you both more than I can express. You've sacrificed so much for me, and I will always be grateful. But we need to talk about our financial arrangement." I poured my heart out onto the screen, explaining my feelings, my fears, and my need for change. It was past midnight when I finally hit send, my hand shaking slightly as I closed the laptop. There was no going back now. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying every family gathering, every guilt-laden phone call, every moment I'd felt trapped by obligation. By the time my alarm went off, I was exhausted but resolute. Whatever came next, I would face it head-on. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. But as the day wore on, the lack of response from my family became deafening. No angry calls, no tearful voicemails, just silence. It was almost worse than the confrontation I'd been bracing for. It wasn't until I was heading home, the city lights blurring outside my cab window, that my phone finally buzzed. A text from my sister Sarah. "We need to talk. Family meeting tomorrow night. Be there." My stomach dropped. A family meeting. In our household, that was code for an intervention, a united front against whoever had stepped out of line. And this time that someone was me. I spent the next day in a haze of anxiety and determination. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would stand my ground without burning bridges. But as I stood outside my parents' modest home in Queens that evening, all my carefully prepared words seemed to evaporate. The moment I stepped inside, I knew this wouldn't be a rational discussion. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed. My father looked disappointed. And Sarah looked furious. "How could you?" she hissed, barely waiting for me to close the door. "After everything they've done for you, this is how you repay them?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Sarah, it's not about repayment. It's about you being selfish," my mother cut in, her voice trembling. "We've always been there for you, Yasmin, always. And now that we need a little help, you want to abandon us?" "That's not what I said," I protested, feeling the familiar guilt creeping in. "I just think we need to establish some boundaries, some financial independence." My father spoke up, his quiet voice somehow more devastating than the other's anger. "Financial independence? Is that what you call turning your back on your family? On your culture?" I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I hadn't come here to cry, to cave in at the first sign of emotional manipulation. "Dad, please, try to understand. I love you all, but I can't keep supporting everyone indefinitely. It's not sustainable, and it's not healthy for any of us." Sarah scoffed. "Not healthy? What's not healthy is forgetting where you came from. You think you're better than us now, with your fancy job and your big apartment?" "That's not fair," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "I've worked hard for everything I have, and I've never forgotten where I came from. But that doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my entire future for what?" My mother interrupted, her eyes flashing. "For family? For the people who raised you, who believed in you when no one else did?" I felt something snap inside me. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. "And I'm grateful for that? I am? But I'm not a child anymore. I'm an adult with my own life, my own dreams. I can't keep living for everyone else's expectations. I need to live for myself, too." The silence that followed was deafening. My family stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In a way, maybe they were. This assertive, boundary-setting Yasmin was new to them. New to me, too. My father was the first to speak, his voice heavy with disappointment. "If that's how you feel, perhaps it's best if you go." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked around at their faces. My mother's hurt, Sarah's anger, my father's resignation, and realized that this was the cost of standing up for myself. It felt like a chasm had opened up between us, one that I wasn't sure could ever be bridged. With a heavy heart, I turned and walked out the door, each step feeling like I was leaving a part of myself behind. As I drove back to the city, tears blurring my vision, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Had I just thrown away the most important relationships in my life? But as the familiar skyline came into view, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. For the first time in years, I was truly on my own. No more guilt-ridden transfers, no more late-night emergency calls. It was terrifying, but it was also freeing. That night, as I sat on my balcony watching the city pulse below, I made another decision. This conflict with my family, this struggle between cultural expectations and personal autonomy, it couldn't just be about me. There had to be others out there, trapped in the same cycle of obligation and resentment. I opened my laptop and began to research. Stories poured out from forums, social media, and news articles. Children of immigrants, struggling to balance success with family expectations. First-generation professionals drowning in requests for financial support. It was a silent epidemic, hidden behind closed doors and polite smiles. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the awakening city, an idea started to take shape. What if I could use my experience, my financial expertise, to help others break free from this cycle? Not by cutting ties with family, but by creating a sustainable model of support and independence? Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into this new project with a fervor that surprised even me. By day, I continued my work at the firm, but every spare moment was dedicated to what I had started calling the Financial Freedom Foundation. I reached out to financial advisors, family therapists, and cultural experts. I drafted plans for educational programs, support groups, and microloans designed to help families transition to financial independence. It was exhausting, exhilarating work, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. But even as I built this new dream, the silence from my family weighed heavily on me. I'd tried calling, texting, even sending a handwritten letter, but the responses were either curt or non-existent. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I channeled that pain into my work. As the foundation began to take shape, I knew I needed to go public with my story. It wasn't just about raising awareness or funding. It was about breaking the silence, about giving others the courage to speak up and make changes in their own lives. I scheduled a press conference, my heart racing, as I sent out the invitations to media outlets. This was it, the moment I would lay bare my struggles, my failures, and my hopes for a better future. There would be no going back after this. The night before the conference, as I was putting the finishing touches on my speech, my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on the screen. With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello? Yasmin." Sarah's voice was tight, controlled. "We saw the press release about your foundation." I swallowed hard. "Sarah, Save it," she cut me off. "Mom and Dad are devastated. They think you're going to air all our dirty laundry in public, make them look like monsters." "That's not what this is about," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm trying to help people, to start a conversation about what? About how terrible your family is? About how we held you back?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself of all the work I'd done, all the people I'd spoken to who were desperate for change. "No, Sarah. It's about breaking a cycle that hurts everyone involved. It's about finding a better way forward for all of us." There was a long pause. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost vulnerable. "And what about us, Yasmin? What about our family?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. I hope we can find a way to be a family without the financial dependence, without the guilt and the obligation. I miss you all more than you know." Another pause, this one stretching out until I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, Sarah sighed. "We'll be watching your press conference. Don't make us regret it." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, phone in hand, torn between hope and fear. They would be watching. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, but it was something. A tiny crack in the wall between us as I stepped up to the podium the next day, cameras flashing and reporters calling. Out questions, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was my story, my truth. Whatever happened next, I would face it with honesty and conviction. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "My name is Yasmin Khoury, and I'm here today to talk about a problem that affects millions of families across America, yet rarely gets discussed in the open. It's a problem born of love, of cultural expectations, and of the immigrant dream. But it's a problem that's tearing families apart and holding back an entire generation from reaching their full potential." I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Somewhere out there I knew my family was watching. I took a deep breath and continued. For years, I've been financially supporting my family. It started small, helping out with bills here and there, sending money for special occasions. But over time, it grew. It became an expectation, an obligation that overshadowed every other aspect of our relationship. And I'm not alone. Countless first-generation professionals find themselves in this situation, caught between the success they've achieved and the duty they feel to give back to the families who sacrificed so much for them. The room was silent now, every eye fixed on me. I could feel the weight of my words, the potential impact they could have. But this isn't just about money. It's about boundaries, about respect, about the right to live our own lives without constant guilt or emotional manipulation. It's about breaking a cycle that keeps both generations stuck. The older generation dependent on handouts, the younger generation unable to build their own financial security. I took another deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. I love my family deeply. They've given me so much, sacrificed so much. But love shouldn't come with a price tag. Support shouldn't mean sacrificing your own future. That's why I'm announcing the launch of the Financial Freedom Foundation. Our mission is to help families like mine find a path to true independence, financial and emotional. As I outlined the foundation's programs and goals, I could see the impact my words were having. Reporters were scribbling furiously, cameras zooming in on my face. But all I could think about was my family, wondering how they were reacting, hoping against hope that they could see the love behind my actions. This foundation isn't about cutting ties or turning our backs on family, I said, nearing the end of my speech. It's about creating healthier relationships, about empowering both generations to stand on their own feet. It's about redefining what family support looks like in the 21st century. I paused, fighting back tears as I delivered my final words. To my own family watching this, I love you. I've always loved you, and I always will. This isn't about rejecting you or our culture. It's about finding a better way forward for all of us. I hope that one day you'll understand, and I hope that together we can build a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect, independence, and unconditional love. As I stepped back from the podium, the room erupted in a flurry of questions and camera flashes, but I barely heard them. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever came next, backlash, criticism, or maybe, just maybe, understanding, I knew I had done the right thing. In the days that followed, my life became a whirlwind. The foundation was inundated with messages from people sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking out. Financial experts and cultural commentators debated the merits of my approach on national television. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. But through it all, one question burned in my mind. What did my family think? It was a week after the press conference when I finally got my answer. I was in my office, poring over applications for the foundation's first round of microloans, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Khoury, there's someone here to see you. They don't have an appointment, but..." I looked up, ready to say I was too busy, when I saw the figure standing behind her. My mother, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "Mom?" I whispered, hardly believing my eyes. She stepped into the office, her eyes taking in the sleek furniture, the view of the city, before finally settling on me. "Yasmin," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We need to talk." As my assistant quietly closed the door behind her, leaving us alone, I felt a mix of hope and trepidation. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, dreading, and longing for. All at once. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. My mother nodded, perching on the edge of the seat as if ready to flee at any moment. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. I could see the toll the past weeks had taken on her, new lines around her eyes, a weariness in her posture. But there was something else too, a flicker of pride, respect, I couldn't quite place it. Your speech, she finally said, her voice soft. It was not what we expected. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What did you expect, Mom? She sighed, her hands twisting in her lap. To be honest, we thought you would denounce us, paint us as villains who only wanted your money. But instead, she trailed off, shaking. Her head. Instead, I prompted gently. Instead, you spoke of love, of finding a better way. Yasmin, Her voice broke, and to my shock, I saw tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. We never meant to become a burden to you. The words I'd longed to hear for so long hit me like a tidal wave. I felt my own eyes filling with tears as I reached across the desk to take her hand. Mom, you're not a burden. You've never been a burden. I needed boundaries. I needed to find a way to support you that didn't mean sacrificing my own future. She nodded, squeezing my hand. I understand that now. Or at least I'm trying to. Your father and I, we come from a different world. Where family is everything, where children supporting parents is just expected. But seeing you up there, hearing you speak about independence and respect, it made us realize how much the world has changed. How much you've changed. I felt a flicker of hope in my chest. And is that okay? That I've changed? My mother was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time seeing me not as her little girl, but as the woman I'd become. It's more than okay, Yasmin. It's wonderful. You've built something amazing here, something that could help so many families like ours. The tears I'd been holding back spilled over. Oh, Mom, I whispered, coming around the desk to hug her. She held me tight, and for a moment I was a child again, safe in my mother's arms. When we finally pulled apart, both wiping our eyes, my mother gave me a watery smile. Your father and Sarah, they're coming around too. It's not easy for them, but they're trying. Sarah's even been looking into some of the programs your foundation offers. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a start, a new beginning for all of us. Mom, I said, an idea forming. Would you be interested in getting involved with the foundation? We could use someone with your experience, your understanding of the cultural dynamics at play. Her eyes widened. Me? But I don't know anything about finance or... I shook my head, smiling. You know more than you think, and more importantly, you know what it's like to be on the other side of this equation. Your perspective could be invaluable. As I watched the idea take root, saw the spark of interest in her eyes, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what I'd been working towards all along, not just independence for myself, but a new kind of interdependence, a way for both generations to support each other, to grow together. Over the next few months, the foundation grew beyond my wildest dreams. We launched programs in cities across the country, held workshops that brought together financial experts and cultural leaders, and started to see real, tangible changes in the lives of the families we worked with. My mother became an integral part of the team, her insight and empathy helping us refine our approach and reach even more people. My father, though still reserved, began attending some of our events, often ending up in deep conversations with other parents struggling to adapt to a changing world. And Sarah surprised us all. She threw herself into learning about personal finance, even volunteering to lead some of our youth workshops. Watching her help young people navigate the same challenges she'd faced, I felt a renewed closeness with my sister that I'd thought was lost forever. As for me, I found a balance I never thought possible. I continued my career in finance, using my expertise to guide the foundation's strategy. But I also made time for family dinners, for long talks with my parents that didn't revolve around money, for silly movie nights with Sarah like we used to have as kids. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of tension, old habits that tried to reassert themselves. But now we had tools, we had understanding, and most importantly, we had a shared commitment to making things work. 1 year after that fateful press conference, we held a gala to celebrate the Foundation's achievements. As I stood on stage, looking out at a room full of families whose lives had been changed, I felt a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. When I started this journey, I said into the microphone, I thought it was about breaking free, about cutting ties and forging my own path. But what I've learned is that true freedom isn't about separation, it's about connection. Healthy, respectful, empowering connection. I saw my family in the front row, my mother beaming with pride, my father nodding solemnly, Sarah giving me a thumbs up. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. We've all had to grow, to change, to challenge our assumptions about what family means in today's world. It hasn't been easy, but standing here tonight, seeing all of you, I know it's been worth it. As the room erupted in applause, I stepped off the stage and into my family's embrace. In that moment, surrounded by their love and the tangible results of our shared efforts, I knew we had found our way to a new kind of American dream. One where success didn't mean leaving your roots behind, but growing strong enough to nourish them in return. The journey wasn't over. It never really would be. But for the first time, I was excited about the road ahead, ready to face whatever challenges came our way. Together, as a family, as a community, we would continue to grow, to learn, and to redefine what it means to truly support one another. As we left the gala that night, walking arm in arm down the glittering New York streets, I looked up at the sky. The stars were barely visible through the city lights, but I knew they were there, just like the bonds of family, sometimes hidden, sometimes strained, but always present. And now, finally, those bonds were a source of strength rather than obligation. I took a deep breath of the cool night air, feeling a profound sense of peace. This was my life now, complex, challenging, but ultimately deeply fulfilling. I had found my voice, my purpose, and in doing so, I had helped my family find theirs too. As we turned the corner towards our favorite late-night cafe, I smiled to myself. The future was bright, full of possibilities I couldn't even imagine yet. But whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. We would face it together, stronger and more united than ever before.